This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Jamie Glazov Moment. Tonight, Soledad O'Brien's disgrace on Castro. Before I begin, I'm a little bit under the weather tonight, so please bear with me. Thank you very much. Many of you probably know, if you don't, Soledad O'Brien was on MSNBC's Morning Joe the other day, and they were discussing Fidel Castro's death, and she was just stressing how complicated it all is. It's all not black and white. You see, there's people that actually liked Castro, and, it's just a very complicated thing. Take a look.
Nothing's going to change, but here we're hearing about complicated emotions. We're hearing about strong emotions. Folks, Castro regime jailed and tortured political prisoners at a higher rate than Stalin's regime during the Great Terror. They murdered, mostly by firing squad, more political prisoners in their first 3 years in power than Hitler's regime murdered in his first 6. They drove 20 times as many people to die trying to escape from Cuba as died trying to escape East Germany. And we're hearing about complicated emotions.
But if
Please
you're trying
give me
to
a break.
understand, no sir, because if you're actually trying to understand why there are Cubans who do like Fidel Castro, right? They like that he gave the finger to the United States. So there are Cubans inside of Cuba, many of my family members, who actually like Fidel Castro. They look at the things that he brought. Cuba today is more Afro-Cuban than it was before a lot of the wealthier, educated Cubans fled. So there are complicated emotions. I don't think that is completely unfair.
But you agree with what he's saying about the atrocities,
absolutely,
right? Yeah.
But there's also with Fidel Castro, there is, yes, absolutely a brutal dictator, but you cannot remove from his history the things that made the Cubans like him in the first place. Remember, the Cubans, when Fidel Castro first came in and overthrew Batista, he was welcomed by all Cubans. They loved him, and very quickly it went south.
No. He was not under Batista. Who jumped on rafts to escape Batista? Can you answer that for me? During Batista, more Americans lived in Cuba than Cubans lived in the U.S., and that was at a time when Cubans could escape, could get visas. Under Batista, Cuba had a higher standard of living than most of Europe.
Cubans, yes, sir, correct.
Alex.
Cubans who were not Afro-Cuban, he's 100% right.
Alex, let's bring you into the conversation. Go ahead.
Okay, very, very interesting. And that was Humberto Fontova, a hero, a scholar that has documented the crimes of Castro. And I think Soledad O'Brien might be better, instead of talking condescendingly to Humberto, to get a notepad out and a pen and start taking notes, because maybe he has something to teach you, Soledad O'Brien. So let us begin with this. You have family members that like Castro, or family relatives, or whoever she was referring to. What does this really mean? Why are you bringing this up? First of all, it's probably a good idea, keep it on the lowdown. But now that you've brought it up because you're making this bigger point of how complicated it all is, we're discussing a mass murderer here. So let's just imagine this hypothetically for a minute. I'm speaking to somebody that's telling me about Auschwitz and Treblinka and Dachau. And I say, oh, wait a minute. It's all very complicated. There's people that liked Hitler. And, I have relatives that think Auschwitz was a good idea. What does this really mean? Okay, Soledad O'Brien, because you have, people or you have relatives that are communist sympathizers or Castro sympathizers, this doesn't make anything complicated. It doesn't take away any of the evil of Fidel Castro or the black and white terms in which we should discuss it. So here's one of the crucial things to say here, and I'm very interested in this example that people bring up, that somebody likes someone. So let's say you're referring to people in a free environment that might like Castro. Okay, well, they're communist sympathizers and they're supporting a mass murderer. Okay, period. But if you're referring to Cubans in Cuba and think that you're making some kind of a significant point, let me tell you something. Soledad O'Brien, get a notepad and a pen out, okay? When you are discussing a totalitarian environment, when execution is awaiting you, when the gulag is awaiting you for even whispering that you might not like Fidel Castro, then when somebody says that they like Fidel Castro, but punishment awaits them if they don't like Fidel Castro, the fact that they say they like Fidel Castro doesn't mean anything. And the fact that you're actually spreading this and talking about it as if it adds some kind of ambiguity and ambivalence, and it's not all black and white, you know, there's Fidel Castro, but it's all very complicated. The fact that you're using this example to make your point in this obfuscation and equivocation you're engaging in is just horrible, and it's shameful, and it's shameless. Because what it's really doing, point by point, these points connect. In the end, you are enabling the oppression of the Cuban people. You are enabling their persecutors, because this is a black and white issue. Castro was a monster, a sadistic murderer. It's very, very black and white. The same way as Stalin was evil, the same way as Hitler and Mao was evil. So it's very peculiar why Soledad O'Brien would be raising this issue. I want to bring up something very quickly in connection to this. When I'm up on 3rd Street Promenade and we do work with the Counter Jihad Coalition, there's oftentimes when we're spreading the truth and trying to tell the truth about Islam. And there are Muslim women, Muslim girls in hijab that come and scream at us, and I've been screamed at many times. You don't know what you're talking about. You're a racist. You're a fascist. You're an Islamophobe. I wear this hijab because it's my free choice and I want to. And even though the Quran says that it's mandatory, and this is what we're saying, but we take pictures of these women. We take pictures of the crowd. And how many times has the hijab-wearing Muslim girl or woman approached us afterwards, crying, begging us to take the picture and delete the picture? And just recently, one Muslim girl, after screaming at me for 2 hours, later returned and begged me to delete that picture, because if her family in Saudi Arabia sees the way that she's dressed, even though she has hijab on, there is still her shirt, her jeans, her hair is showing. She's crying, saying, delete it, because something very terrible will happen to her if they find out. So let's think about this for a minute. She's screaming at me that I am lying about her religion and the mandates of the Quran. And yet she's defending the religion whose followers will punish her. I'm bringing this up because Soledad O'Brien is referencing and bringing up Cubans who supposedly support Castro. And many of the ones she's bringing up are living in a totalitarian environment and being faced with the possibility of execution. Why does somebody like Soledad O'Brien behave in this manner? There could be many reasons. We're not inside her mind and soul, but I will tell you this. There are many people who have a Stockholm syndrome with the left. And when you watch Soledad O'Brien and you watch the way she behaves, she wants to be in the good graces. She used to be a CNN host. She wants to be popular with the liberals and the leftists. She doesn't want to be like Ann Coulter or the Trump supporters or like Humberto Fontova. She's very, very open-minded, and the death of Castro is very complicated. When a person like Soledad O'Brien behaves in this way, pursuing their own narcissistic agendas to be popular in certain milieus and get their approval, they are betraying, in this case, the suffering Cuban people and enabling their vicious and sadistic oppressors. And Soledad O'Brien should be ashamed of herself, especially since, as she says, she's a Cuban American and comes from a line of Cuban Americans. We'll see you on the next edition of the Jamie Glazov Moment. Good night.